Hi there, I'm Alli and welcome to my channel. Today I am doing a take on the very popular TikTok table, or this table right here that was made popular by this artist. Now this table has been around for quite a while now, but I thought it'd be fun to do my own version of the trend. So let's hop in to the first project. The tile table has been super popular on TikTok for months, so I decided to do kind of a smaller recreation using this sheet of square tiles. I cut them down first into 4 sets of 4x4 tiles. Next, I'm going to be using this paint that was sent to me from PLAID. They make all of the popular paint brands, and I joined their ambassador program. And this is Calypso Coral, and I used about 3 coats to cover all of the tiles to make them this really pretty peach color. Now, to lock that paint all in, PLAID also sent me this dishwasher safe Mod Podge, and I figured this might be a good way to seal everything in, protect it, since we will be grouting these tiles. And I will say it did work pretty well, but I do wish I would have sanded the tiles a little bit before I painted them. Now, I don't have power tools, so my idea was to just use these Dollar Tree, like MDF or whatever they're made out of, signs and cut them down to create some cubes. So I just used my ruler to mark this out to make a couple of 4x4 inch squares. And all you do is just score it a little bit with a utility or craft knife, and then you're able to kind of snap the sign and break it into smaller pieces. It's really, really simple to do. I then used my hot glue gun to attach it to make some cubes, and I also used some of the little Jenga blocks just as reinforcement in the corners. Now I decided that I also wanted to make a bigger set, so I have these and I'm keeping them white, and I also made a bigger cube that was 6 by 6 inches. Now you could use the proper tile materials, but I'm just using E6000 and a little hot glue to attach the tiles to the cubes. Next up, it is time to grout. I just picked up this small container of grout, and it did work for all of the projects you will see in this video, and I mixed in the tiniest amount of water. I brought out my phone because I've been making reels, and you'll be finding these on TikTok since they're TikTok inspired. So if you want to go follow me there, say hi, I love new friends, those will be linked in the description. Okay, now that the grout is mixed, it is time to fill in all of the tiles. I ended up just using a popsicle stick on this small one here because it was small enough to push the grout into each of those tile joints. Now, one thing I didn't consider when assembling these cubes was how much of a gap that the edges of the tiles would make on the corners. So you might want to consider that when you assemble the cubes to make sure that the tile edges overlap a little bit better. And so that would probably mean making the little pieces of board that we cut down a little bit shorter. Oh, I forgot to mention too, this is white grout, which I guess is kind of obvious at this point. Once I had filled in all of the joints, I then used a damp sponge to wipe away some of the excess. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but you don't want large amounts of grout sitting on the tiles. I also used a paper towel just to kind of buff away a little bit of the excess water and grout. I wanted to create the opposite effect on this piece with the white tile by dyeing the grout with this Candid Coral acrylic paint. So I just put in a decent amount of paint and a little bit of water since the paint is going to act as water. And I mixed it all in and I added paint and water as needed until I achieved this kind of fluffy, sort of like frosting-like texture is kind of how it reminds me. And then for this one, I started out using the popsicle stick to get the grout in, but found that using an old plastic credit card like this worked the best. Also, sometimes you might need to just use your fingers. It helps to get everything into those wider joints. And as always, make sure you wear gloves when doing projects like these. Once again, I used a damp sponge to wipe off the excess and a paper towel to buff away and clean off those tiles. Also, I did forget to mention, if you wanted to paint the inside of these cubes, if you use a Dollar Tree sign, you definitely can. I found that you couldn't really tell when the cubes were complete. Now just let that grout dry overnight and you will have your TikTok table inspired planters. If you're new here, welcome. I post new DIY videos every single week based on current decor trends, and I love a good mix of boho, modern, and mid-century modern. So if you love anything like that, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join this little squad of DIYers that we are building here on I'm Alli DIY. Now, let's hop into the second project. Next, I'm using this 13 by 15 inch scrap piece of plywood that I have in my stash, but this would probably work a lot better if you used a 12 by 14 inch piece board. And then I'm also using these round penny tiles and a mirror. I also picked up one of these little tile edging pieces. I know they have a name, but I don't know what it is. So if you know what these kind of like rounded edge tiles are called, leave it in the comments. So I first started with one of my sheets of tile and I traced out where the mirror would be pretty centered, but I did want to leave it a little bit closer to the top because of that little shelf piece that I'm going to be adding. So that gave me about 3 tiles on the top and 3 tiles on the side, as you can see here. Then I just used a utility knife. I like these breakable knives for this project because you can extend it out pretty far to get in between those tiles and cut out exactly what you want. Now, for the sake of saving tiles and not opening up another pack, I decided to just piece together this single sheet of tiles, and I was actually able to frame out the entire mirror with just one sheet of tiles. So if you use the exact same size plywood that I do, or if you do a smaller plywood mirror, you only need one sheet of tiles. And I do want to say that this project is inspired by an account I saw on Pinterest called All the Peaches Please. I'll be sure to link that tutorial below if you want to check it out. It's also where I learned that you can dye the grout using acrylic paint. Now, just like the cube planter, instead of using some tile mud, I decided to just glue everything down with E6000. I do think using like tile adhesive would have been a little bit better because there's so many gaps to fill in this project, but the E6000 worked just fine. I also used E6000 glue to glue down this little shelf piece right underneath where the mirror would be positioned, and I just kind of held it in place until it started to get firm, and it worked out very well with just the E6000 glue. Now, to fill in some of these extra gaps on the edges and add a little bit of a design element, I glued down just some individual penny tiles in these spaces, so it almost created a little bit of texture that comes off the edges of the mirror on the left and right sides. I then used E6000 glue to attach my 8 by 10 inch mirror right into the little space that I left. I let all of that glue dry overnight, and then I used painter's tape to cover up the mirror. Now we're going back in with the grout, and since I didn't want to buy a whole new tub of grout, I decided to mix up my own color, and this made up the perfect color, but I do think I made this grout a little too watery, so it was a bit difficult to work with. It had more of a pancake batter consistency versus that nice like frosting icing type consistency that you want. But nonetheless, it did still work, and I just used the same plastic credit card method to apply into all the nooks and crannies of these tiles. And I did find that this one was extra messy, one because my grout was too watery, and because of the black pigment in the paint, that just was really hard to wipe away. So if you can find a small tub of like dark gray grout, then definitely get that, but my Lowe's didn't have a small tub of the dark gray grout, so I decided I was just gonna mix my own. I feel like projects like these are out of my comfort zone, but it is just fun to experiment and try new things and new techniques. And I'm sure my dad would be proud of me because he is a professional flooring contractor. Once the grout was in, I used my damp sponge to try to wipe away as much as possible of the grout and the paint. It was a bit tricky, like I said, because of all of that pigment, but I was able to buff away most of it, especially with a dry paper towel. Then I made sure to cover the edges with a little bit of grout, that way you weren't seeing the ugly yellowish plywood. After 24 hours, you can remove the paper covering the mirror and the painter's tape. It was a bit tricky in some of the spots where the grout was a little thicker, but I was able to remove it all and then clean it all off using some glass cleaner. As an extra TikTok-inspired touch, I decided to use my Cricut to print out a cute little affirmation or phrase here. I chose "Hello Lovely" because, you want your mirror to compliment you when you look in it. And I just applied that down using the little squeegee spatula tool and peeled away the transfer tape. Now in the comments, I want to know, are you on TikTok? I find myself trying to avoid it as much as possible because I get sucked in the scrolling and it doesn't stop for hours. But there is so much DIY inspo there. And if you want to see a third tile DIY in a different style, more of a boho or farmhouse look, I'll link that on the screen here for this Moroccan tile tray that I made about a year ago. And that's all I have for you in this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next one. Bye!